Welcome to this module of Professor Messer's free Microsoft 7680 certification training course. I'm James Messer. In this module, we're going to look at the configuration options available to you inside of Internet Explorer. This comes from our exam requirements under the Hardware and Applications section, where we need to configure compatibility view, security settings, providers, add-ons, the in-private mode, and certificates for websites. We're going to go through all of this in this video and much more. If you've ever moved from one version of one browser to another, you may notice that some of the websites you go to now look a little different. That's because even though it's the same browser type, it's still Internet Explorer, still from Microsoft, there are subtle changes that occur between different versions. And because of that, you may run into issues with some of the applications that you run inside of a browser. These browsers are becoming our central point to get our mail, to run mission-critical business applications, and many things that we do day to day happen right in our browser. And if an update to a browser changes a key piece of code that has a dramatic impact on one of the applications that we run, we may want to go back to the old way of doing things. With this compatibility view, we're able to do that. We can change the way our browser reacts to different websites based on a more compatible mode. And because these versions of browsers can be very different and these dramatic changes can take place, we can turn on or turn off these compatibility views. So if you'd like your Internet Explorer to feel like or act like it is an older version, we just need to add these compatibility views or turn on the compatibility view for the website we happen to be on. You'll see this under the Tools pull-down menu. There is a compatibility view setting, and you can simply add websites into this view so that every time you go to that website, it's always in a compatibility view mode. You can also, at your whim, anytime you'd like, inside of the browser, click the compatibility view button, and the browser screen that you're on will now be in that compatibility mode. There are also a number of websites that Microsoft keeps track of, and they will automatically change your browser into compatibility mode if it is a known site that has problems with the new version of the browser. There are also a number of settings that you can administratively manage inside of your group policy editor. You can see that you can turn on Internet Explorer 7 mode, and you can configure it to always be on. You can turn off compatibility view, so there's no option for having a compatibility mode. There's standards modes. You can turn off the button so that people just don't have the button there available. You can include the updated website list from Microsoft that we were just talking about, and you can use a policy list of Internet Explorer 7 sites so that it can automatically adjust itself as well. You may not always see the compatibility view button, but when it's available, it'll be right here next to your refresh button. On Professor Messer, I've got the compatibility view button there. But if you go to Microsoft.com, one of the things you'll find is that the compatibility view button disappears completely. That's because Microsoft has already put into their code that they are ready for IE8. It works just fine in Internet Explorer, and there's absolutely no need to have the compatibility view button there. You'll find the options for compatibility view under the Tools pull-down menu, your compatibility view settings, and you can add websites into your compatibility view. You can include the updated website list from Microsoft, display intranet sites in compatibility view, and maybe display all websites in compatibility view. Those were some of the things that we could also configure in our group policies as well. Now it can also be done on the front end of your Internet Explorer right here in your compatibility view options. One of the things you may have noticed in the compatibility view settings is that it could automatically figure out which websites were on your intranet. And that's something that IE does very well. It puts these into zones. These are security zones that can be in an internet zone, a local intranet zone, a trusted sites, or a restricted sites zone. And then you can customize the security for each one of those individual zones. And this gives you a little bit more flexibility. Maybe you'd like to be a little bit more concerned with security from the internet, but a little bit less concerned if it is an intranet or a local web server. You can find all of those settings under your Tools pull-down menu under the Internet Options and the Security tab. In your Internet Explorer, if you go to that Tools, Internet Options, and the Security tab, you'll be able to configure any of these. So there's your 4 zones, and you can see that as you move through the zones, they have different default settings in every single one of these. You can also put in trusted sites and restricted sites here as well to make sure that if something is very good or very bad, that you have your Internet Explorer be able to handle the security in either of those scenarios. If you recall the very first time you started Internet Explorer, it gave you options on what search providers you could use. It gave you a big list of search providers. So you can use Bing, which is Microsoft's default search. Maybe you like Google. Maybe you like Yahoo. You can make changes within the browser so it will automatically go by default to those search providers. You can also find a number of add-ons inside of Internet Explorer, and you can manage those all under the Tools pull-down menu. There's a Manage Add-ons option. Since this is a stock configuration of Internet Explorer, if I go to Tools and Manage Add-ons, there's not going to be much here. You can see under Toolbars and Extensions, I don't have any loaded here. But if you end up getting in one of those situations where a lot of different toolbars are on the screen, you may want to disable or remove them completely. You should find them right here in the Manage Add-ons. Here's the search providers option. Bing is the default, and that's the one I've chosen. You can always go down to the bottom where it says Find More Search Providers, and it brings up all the different options you have. The entire add-ons gallery is here on the Microsoft website, and you can add Google, you can do Amazon, you can use eBay. There are a lot of different options in here. You can really customize IE to work exactly the way you'd like. There's also accelerators in here, which means you can go to your browser and simply and very easily bring up a map or email right here from your browser using things like Windows Live and Bing to be able to do some of those things. Privacy is always a very important consideration when you're on the internet, and there's 2 modes built into Internet Explorer that can enhance the privacy that you have when you're browsing and surfing around on the internet. The first one is an in-private browsing mode. This is this in-private name here, and this limits the information that the browser is going to save. If you've ever gone to your browser after a browsing session and you start typing in part of the name of a site you've been to, you'll see all the names sort of auto-populate as you go. You can also go to the history and see everywhere you've been. Well, if you'd like to limit that, you can turn on this in private browsing mode, and now it's not going to store a lot of those things that are there. The other in private mode that's available is called in private filtering. This means when you go to a website that it's going to limit the amount of information that website can learn about you. This in-private filtering is especially good if you are dealing with a lot of third-party add-ons to a number of sites that watch the way you surf and you'd rather they didn't. Now, sometimes that actually enhances the ability for you to be provided ads that are more accurate to the things you're looking at. Other times you just like to be completely private and not really provide more information to those third parties. So by adding the in-private filter, we're going to be able to keep the information away from those third parties. You'll find a lot of those settings under the Safety and In-Private Filtering Settings option. The first time you use in-private filtering, you'll get an option under the Safety pull-down menu for in-private filtering. You'll get these in-private filtering settings, and it says block for me everything, or let me choose which providers receive my information. If you like to block everything all at once, we'll choose block for me. And now we go into an in-private filtering option. We can look and see with this check mark that we are indeed being filtered right now, so we know that we're pretty safe there. If we ever want to go back and change some of those, the in-private filtering settings allow you to automatically block, choose the content to block or allow, or you can turn off the filtering completely. For in-private browsing, let's go back up and choose in our safety. We have this option here for in-private browsing. Let's turn that on, and it actually pops up a new window. And notice right here next to the address, it has in private. I'll let you know whenever you're in this screen, even if you have many different windows up and many different tabs, you'll always be able to see that in private there. And it says to turn it off, very simple, just close this browser window and the in private goes away and we're back to where we were. You can see it's not listed in the view that we had previously. And that's a very, very quick and easy way to go into that private browsing mode and allow you to surf around without having a lot of information stored for later. As an administrator, of course, you can set group policies that can administratively manage some of these in-private filtering and in-private browsing settings. That's under your administrative templates, Windows components, Internet Explorer, and in private, where you can turn off or on in-private filtering or browsing. You can say don't collect in-private filtering data. You can even disable toolbars and extensions when the in-private browsing starts, or set a threshold for your in-private filtering. It's all in your group policies. Along with privacy of our personal information, we want to be sure when we visit a website and we provide information to that website that that information is secure as it traverses the internet. One way that we secure this information is with the use of certificates. Our web servers out there on the internet have these certificates that allow us to do a couple of things. It first allows us to validate that the site we're on really is the one that we're looking for. So if you go to Professor Messer, you'll see I have an option there to show you exactly that you are on ProfessorMesser.com, and GeoTrust, which is a very big company that provides these certificates, has verified this site. And in that way, you know that when you type in and see that, this really is then the Professor Messer site. Someone isn't trying to phish you or get information from you that is trying to trick you on where you're going. Another nice part about certificates is that it allows us to encrypt the data between your browser and my web server. And this is very, very useful whenever you're trying to send credit card information, private information, or really information of any kind. If it was not encrypted, somebody along the way could very easily grab those packets and have a look at that information. And by using certificates, we're able to set up these encryption methods that keeps the bad guys away from seeing the information we're sending between one site and another. You can see these certificates if you go into your Tools, Internet Options, Content, and Certificates. You'll see the list of all of those certificates that are in your Internet Explorer that are just included by default. And you can see the things that you might recognize. There is the GeoTrust certificate that is associated with the ProfessorMesser.com website. GTE CyberTrust has their certificates in here. VeriSign has their certificates in here. Microsoft has added theirs into this mix as well. By having these certificates in place, these authorities that are here are there so that when you go to those websites, your browser will automatically trust that that certificate is valid. If you were to build your own certificate that didn't come from one of these organizations, Internet Explorer would give you a message. And it would say, I don't trust this certificate authority. If you're building out internally in your own organization an infrastructure to provide these certificates, then you're probably also building out your very own private certificate authority. If that's the case, you'll need to take your certificate authority certificates and put them into your Internet Explorer browsers, everybody's Internet Explorer browser. If you don't, those browsers will not automatically trust your internal websites. So that becomes very important if you're going to be encrypting data between yourself and those internal web servers. This is also something you have to consider when you're rolling out new machines, that you'll want to also include all of your internal certificates with it, or the certificate authority that signs those certificates. That makes it very, very simple. You can, of course, have these automatically rolled out with things like group policies to make it a little bit easier to manage. We go to our Tools, Internet Options under Content and the Certificates or Publishers, depending on what you'd like to look at. You can see what some of these might look like. So you can see our GeoTrust certificate is right here. If we were to drill down on one of these certificates, we would see, for instance, the one from Equifax, that is the certificate authority that's associated with Professor Messer. We can see the details of this certificate. And by having this certificate authority on my Internet Explorer, my website is automatically trusted. It's the other side of this certificate that Equifax still has that they're signing my certificate with and giving it to me. And because your Internet Explorer goes to my site and recognizes that it's been signed by somebody that's already trusted, it's not going to give you any error messages. It's when there's a problem with the certificate that you're going to start to see errors pop up in your Internet Explorer browser. And it's problems like this. You've probably seen this before. This one says there's a problem with this website's security certificate. The certificate presented by this website was issued for a different website's address. Obviously, you can't take a certificate for one website, try to use it on another one. You should get a message should something like that occur. In this case, you'll notice I went to https://ProfessorMesser.com. So we're missing a www at the beginning. My certificate on my web server is specifically for www.ProfessorMesser.com. And if you try to go to use any other name, you're going to get this message popping up in Internet Explorer to warn you that the certificate is different than the website URL that you went to. In Internet Explorer, you'll get a lot of different kinds of errors depending on what the exact problem is with the certificate. Website security certificate has been revoked. That's a bad thing. Website's address doesn't match the address in the security certificate. That's very similar to what we were just looking at. The security certificate's out of date. These things only have a certain amount of time that they're valid, and when they become out of date, you've got to get a new certificate. The website security certificate isn't from a trusted source. It has to be in that list of trusted providers, those trusted certificate authorities. And if you have a trusted CA, then we're automatically going to trust that. If you're not in the list, and therefore I'm not going to trust that. And if it's something else that doesn't fall into those categories, it will tell you that it's found a problem with this website certificate. A more generic issue, a generic error message that pops up, but still one that tells you should be worried about the information that's in this certificate. Let's review some of the things we've learned in this module. Our first question, what should you enable to allow older browser applications to run properly? This is if you ever are using a newer browser and you end up having a problem with an older application, you'll want to turn on the compatibility view. Our second question, where can you find a list of Internet Explorer add-ons? Well, if you recall, there was a menu option you could go to see what all of the add-ons that were configured for your browser, and that was under the Tools pull-down menu under Manage Add-ons. And our last question, which in-private feature prevents third-party sites from monitoring your browsing patterns? And if we recall looking at those, there were two different in-private features. The ones that filtered out this data were called in-private filtering. That covers our requirements for learning a lot here about Internet Explorer and the way that it operates. Hopefully now you've got a better idea of how to manage your Internet Explorer desktops either on the machine itself or through things like group policy. If you'd like to see any of our absolutely free Microsoft videos, you'd like to participate in our message boards, or send me a message, visit our website at ProfessorMesser.com.